So welcome everybody to the latest live stream from the Breaking Into Yacht Brokerage series. This is actually a video I've wanted to do for quite a while now, but it's depended upon me coming to Monaco, which is where we are today. In fact, in the background there, I don't know if you can see it, but that's the Northrop & Johnson offices in Monaco, and I just thought it'd be really useful for people who are interested in becoming a yacht broker or getting into the yacht industry to speak to somebody who's successfully got into the industry despite some challenges. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ramble a little bit for a few minutes until we get a few more people joining us, because usually it takes 3-4 minutes to get a good group. We're already at 16, so that's actually pretty good. And just to add a little bit of flesh on the bones of what I was saying, you may have noticed that a lot of the walkthrough videos that I do recently end up with me saying, I don't represent this yacht, it's represented by Ed Dickinson. Ed's one of the youngest, most hardworking brokers I've ever met in my life. That's one of the reasons that I cooperate with him on a lot of the yachts that I've got listed. So without any further ado, Ed, first of all, can you give us a bit of background about yourself and why you became a yacht broker?
Okay, so I started as a yacht broker 5.5 years ago with Northrop, and before that I was crew on board a yacht in Monaco for around 2 years. Before that I was fresh out of university, so it's the only real career that I've done. Before yachting, I was more set on sort of accounting or the finance side of it. I was born in Guernsey and I grew up in Guernsey. I went to school in Guernsey, then over to the UK for my sort of later years, and I always did work placement in finance. And it was actually a talk between my cousin, who was a crew member, one meeting, and he was telling me sort of what a great job he had working as crew. And age 21, I don't think I was quite ready for a serious job in finance, so I sort of decided to go off and get my yacht master.
Just for people watching, what is your yacht master?
So the yacht master is basically the qualification to allow you to navigate a small vessel. So you learn sail handling, and you learn sort of navigation, you learn how to be able to sort of take charge of a boat up to sort of 24 meters. And you know, with that you can probably go anywhere in the world with your friends, with your family, and be able to, you know, happily sort of either drive or sail the boat. And that process, you have to cover 2,500 miles of skippering, and then you get examined at the end. And so I did this in the Isle of Wight. I did a number of other courses alongside it, which was suited towards the super yacht industry. And then in March of 2013, I got my first job. So I moved down to Monaco and I worked on a 205-foot motor vessel, and I joined as a deckhand. And I worked with that yacht for two summer seasons, and we did a big refit season in Barcelona. The boat subsequently sold around 2 years after I joined it, and it was an excellent opportunity for me to look at my next step. I remember I spent sort of that spring winter time writing around 100 job applications off to shipping brokers, to yacht brokers, and I was pretty set on doing something in brokerage. And of the 100 handwritten letters I sent out, I got about 3 or 4 responses, and Northrop & Johnson were the most proactive. I think they had me on a flight within 2 days to the south of France, and
right.
Yeah, the rest was history.
It's really useful information, because for those of you who've been watching the other videos in the series of Breaking Into Yacht Brokerage, one of the things that I recommend is just to get your foot into the door in the industry. And one way of doing that is, particularly for younger people, is to work as a deckhand on a yacht. And from a practical perspective, you went out and you got the actual qualifications that you need to work on a yacht, which is really a first step. So Ed worked on a yacht, got into the industry. Then, when he had the opportunity, sent more or less how many applications?
There was about, well, between yachting and shipping, there was close to 100.
Okay.
And I still look back
Yeah.
at the letters I sent out, or the emails I followed up with, and the phone calls I made to see, you know, who I'm working with in the industry today who actually had the time to reply to me.
Right.
Which I always remind brokers of when we're doing business.
Whether they replied to you or
Whether
not.
they did or didn't reply.
So then Northrop & Johnson gave you the opportunity. Now you don't even, that's quite unusual actually, but Ed was particularly persistent, and I think probably timing had something to do with it as well, that Northrop were wanting to increase their presence in the Med at the time. So how did you then go about learning to be a broker? I mean, what was the learning process for you?
So they hired me straight in. A lot of the brokerage houses were saying, we don't want to take you as a broker. What we'll do is we'll take you on as a sales assistant or a charter assistant, and you can spend 2 years learning the ropes. And I said, I don't want to spend 2 years learning the ropes. I want to. I've had 2 years exposure to the industry. I knew an ocean code from a Fed ship from a Benetti, so I was like, I can come in, I can do this. And effectively the first few months of it was the realization setting in of, you're hearing what boats sell for, and the rumours of the Grand Commission suddenly hit home, how long it would take before anything happened. And it was a lot of treading water for the first year. And I think in my first year as a broker, I definitely didn't sell a boat, and I had my first opportunity to list a boat, which sort of was a good experience of how you put a listing together and how you do sort of go through the boats, how you build up a relationship with the clients, how you answer inquiries, the dynamics of boat shows. I eventually didn't sell the boat; it went off to another broker, unfortunately. But what comes around goes around, and I eventually sold that boat earlier this year. But the first year was the most painful, I think, because it's the realization setting in. And in that first year, I met so many guys of similar age, of similar experience, who were coming in and just didn't hack it. Brokerages are houses which you need to produce to get anything back. They're not paying you a large salary. You've got to go out and you sort of eat what you kill, effectively.
Yeah.
And I think it took a long time. And then after year one, David was predominantly in Italy at that point, and we'd had about 3 or 4 phone calls and didn't know each other particularly well. But I think it's when David moved over to, came to spend more time in the office, and that's when we started developing our business together. And it was David who sort of pushed me to say, right, let's get out on the road and let's really start meeting people, let's start meeting clients. And I think the first project we did together was Izumi, Palmer Johnson.
Yeah, I'm going to cut in because we've got some questions coming in, and Rudy very kindly has sent a super chat. Thanks very much, Rudy, a €10 super chat. Much appreciated. And I'd remind you, by the way, if you've got questions for Ed, this is a great opportunity to ask him anything that you want, related to yachting, of course, and to brokerage, although I guess you can ask him anything that you want. Rudy's question is, isn't it difficult enough to start your trade this year and the years to follow? Do you think it's more difficult now than it was? I mean, you started 4 years ago, 5 years ago?
2015. When I started in 2015, a lot of brokers were still recovering from 2008. They were still sat there saying, well, there's no market and it's never been like the good days and everything. So I always had it in the back of my head that it was never going to be the boom days when I entered. And I definitely think I got in at the right time. For a lot of people I talk to, going from having a stable salary to not having anything, you've got to do it when you're in a position of, you can afford to live on nothing, right? And you can afford to take the cut in your income. And I do think the market is definitely going to be getting tougher. I think, one of the conversations David and I always have is you've got to keep the value of the broker involved in the deal. So David's internet, David was years ahead of people in YouTube and in video walkthroughs, and has gained the online presence, and you've got to do something to build up your reputation in the industry to keep you going through these hard times. Now 2020 has been a very difficult year for many people, and in general the buyers that are out there saying we want to pay 50% because there's no other buyers out there, but actually it's been one of our most successful years in brokerage. I think there's a lot of transactions happening. There's sellers who are willing to negotiate slightly more because they've had no use after the boat this summer. There's buyers who are cash buyers and they're sitting looking for the right deals. So I do think there will be a slowdown. A lot of brokerages have made cutbacks in their overheads. And yeah, so I definitely think it is a tough period. I do think I was lucky to make the decision to join 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So, but yeah,
Cool. And also Ed's being modest because he's already closed the sale on 4 yachts this year, which is pretty remarkable actually. And it's not ended there, yet. I'm just going to go back on some of the other questions that people have asked. Dominic says, are we live for real this time? Yes, Dominic. I pressed go live too soon and then had to delete the video when I realised what I'd done. So you probably caught that that first attempt. And it's good to know that you're watching this because you also say what Ed's describing, that's what you want to do. So this is a great opportunity, Dominic, if you've got any questions for Ed. Salman Khan says, David, is your nose broken? No, as T Savage quite rightly said, I had some surgery on it. Actually not that long ago, I think it was 3 months ago, so I'm waiting for the scar to kind of heal. Thankfully, people don't watch my videos for my beautiful face, so it won't affect the videos. T Savage also says boat sales are up. Let me ask your opinion on that. Do you think sales this year?
No, my opinion is obviously through lockdown, so that period of March, April, May, nothing could happen. Surveyors couldn't travel, lawyers couldn't go to completion meetings, brokers couldn't inspect the boats, they couldn't attend, and there was a huge amount of uncertainty. So if you actually look at the number of sales in the year in total, we're probably on par with 2019.
Yeah.
But if you do look on the online statistics, there was a huge surge of sales in June, July, especially July. I think there were 70 closings over 24 meters, and then even through to August. And I think a lot of that was just delayed transactions or postponed transactions, which eventually got closed. A lot of people renegotiating their positions. So I wouldn't say that sales are up, but I think definitely it's not a weak market. We've seen
It's not, is it?
and we've also seen a lot of significant yachts sort of selling off market.
Yeah.
You know, won't say names, but there's some significant movement in traffic.
Basically the yacht brokerage market is divided into yacht sales and yacht charter. Sales don't seem to be affected too badly at all, remarkably. But the charter brokers are having a hard time, aren't they? Because people don't want to travel to go on their vacation on their yachts, on the charter yachts, for fear that while they're away, there might be some change in laws, in quarantine, they might get back to their country and have to quarantine themselves. So with that uncertainty, people are loath to commit to a 2-week charter holiday, but they don't seem to be reluctant to go ahead and buy a yacht, which is great news. Now another question, interesting one, again from T Savage. I'd like to know how many people under 40 are in the market for £1 million plus yachts?
Well, I think the last transaction Dave and I did was probably, they're both on that sort of age group, wouldn't you say?
I think they're probably over 40. I think both seller was definitely over 40 because I googled him to see how old he was, and he was 48. I think.
I'd say there's a lot of buyers and sellers who are under 50. Definitely.
Yes.
That sort of 40 to 50 category is definitely a lot of my clients are in that category, and there's a few very young. I think I sold the second boat I sold this year. The seller was 23 years old with Ace One.
Really?
Yeah, he was a racing driver. So
Wow.
it's so there are some very very young clients.
Yeah.
And that's predominantly, but I mean at the much larger end, I think there's less so. And usually people grow in yachts. And if you think the average age cycle of a yacht ownership is 3 to 5 years, they'll work their way up through boats before they get to much larger boats. And some people have sort of 7 or 8 boats before they even get up to the super yacht size.
Yeah.
So I think usually 40 to 50 years
Yeah,
old.
I'd agree with that. 40 to 50 seems the sweet spot, doesn't it? Then I'm just going to read through these comments to see them. Amhad Asyer says, I will surely buy a luxury yacht when I grow up. How old are you? Do let me know how old you are. And good luck with that. You've got to work very hard, and I'm sure you're managing it. Harold Sather, have you done any deals? This is a good question for you. Harold asks, have you done any deals in the Scandinavian market, or is it mainly in the Med?
As David knows, one of my closest clients is Norwegian,
Yeah.
and he's probably a good friend as well, and he's actually introduced me to a very close-knit group of Norwegian buyers and Norwegian sellers. So that's actually become a very strong centre point in my client base is this group of Norwegians, and their eventual dream is actually to have most of their boats up in the fjords. They all they're going from fast boats to explorer boats, and they're seeing that the cruising destinations are changing. The milk run of the Med is getting quite boring for them.
Yeah.
So going further afield is actually becoming attractive. So I definitely think we all know of a lot of Danish and Swedish owners as well, but in particular Norwegians I've worked a lot of times with.
Great. More questions coming in. Pilot Nelson asks, when working for a brokerage selling $1 million boats, is one allowed to sell smaller value yachts in the under 200,000 value point?
We're allowed to. It's more what market we specialise in.
Yeah.
I think that's the best way of putting it. Usually, if we're talking about 200,000, sometimes it's not to say we won't do the transaction. If I've got a good client of ours, like recently we had a buyer who was looking for a chase boat.
Yeah.
And his budget was 250,000 for something like an Axopar or a Goldfish, and we're more than happy to look for him and find him those boats. But in terms of marketing and selling the boat, and it's not that we have a cut-off, we take it on a case-by-case basis, I think.
Yeah.
But there's every listing that we have, we really invest quite heavily in time and in effort, and you've always got to sort of weigh up the costs against what's going to be coming back around.
Yeah.
So I think the smallest deal I've done this year was in sort of 800,000, but that boat was based in Monaco.
Yeah.
So it was on the doorstep, and we could manage it easily, and we still did a good job. Had it sold within 6 months, I think.
Excellent. I think if you're going to go for selling yachts under the 200,000 euro mark, that's what you have to specialise in, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you have to be prepared to sell a lot of them to build up your client base, and it's a great business if that's what you decide to do. It's just not the business particularly that we're in, is it? I mean, nothing to stop us from doing it, but it just wouldn't make sense to build up a client base of people buying very large yachts and then try to go after the ones which are worth a lot less. So hopefully that answers your question, Pilot Nelson. Here's an interesting one. Super Yachts, Tenders and Toys. That sounds like a very interesting YouTube channel, by the way. I'll check that out afterwards. Super Yachts, Tenders and Toys asks, what is your favourite strategy in finding new clients?
If I'm totally honest, sort of cold prospecting is something I don't enjoy doing, and I've had very limited luck in. But if I have a lead, as soon as I have a lead come in, so very often the success we have is an owner of a yacht will inquire to us about one of our listings, and whether it's a smaller boat than theirs or a larger boat than theirs, or they have the same boat and they want to get their insight into just what we're doing. And my favourite thing is building that relationship. And David and I have managed to turn around 2 or 3 central agencies from people who we first spoke to 3 years ago. And it's just always just following up and building that relationship. I've always found that there's a lot of people in this industry I trust, and I wouldn't call them introducers, but I'll always go to them for business. So whatever service they provide, whether it's sort of surveying or their captains or whatever, I've always found the same people trust me as a broker.
Yeah.
So it's a two-way thing. I know that I'll never say to a client, you have to use this surveyor or you have to use this lawyer. You always give a selection of 3 or 4, it's their decision. In the same way, they know that they can trust me as one of their trusted brokers.
Yeah.
But when I first started, I tried the cold emailing and the cold calling, and I very rarely got responses.
Yeah. You have to try everything.
No, exactly.
You just have to try every single tactic. But I can say that Ed is incredibly industrious with For example, if we get an inquiry on a particular sort of yacht, let's say neoprene, the black Mangusta 108, Ed is very good at logging every single person that inquires about it, and then when a similar thing comes on the market, you then go right back and contact everybody to say, you know, you asked about neoprene, now this is on the market as well. And it's that sort of industrious approach that's been successful. We've got another super chat. Thank you very much indeed, Harold. Much appreciated. I'm not sure I totally understand the question. You say, is it only exclusive listings? So,
I mean, we generally only work on an exclusive. Well, I mean, David and I will only list boats on an exclusive basis.
yeah.
I mean, I actually just this afternoon, David and I were having this discussion with an owner of quite a large yacht, and he said, "Oh, no, I want to sell it off market, and you know, maybe you've got buyers." Now, there is a chance, an off chance, that I do have a buyer for his boat, but my personal client base, the only way I could then sell that boat is if I personally had someone looking exactly for his boat.
Yeah.
And that's a misconception that a lot of sellers can have. And the other big mistake is giving open listings. If you give an open listing to 5 brokers, your idea in your head is that you've got 5 brokers advertising your boat. But what you don't realise is that those 5 brokers have got no guarantee of a return, so they're not going to invest. You're not going to have good photography, you're going to have mixed information on the internet. You'll find brokers start undercutting the asking prices to get the buyer's attention. And before you know it, the entire internet is full of misinformation, miscommunication, and the seller is also being called up the whole time. So exclusive listings is the only way that David and I work. And if a client doesn't want to come with an exclusive listing, then we'll keep a good relationship and we'll certainly keep in touch. But we've got to be able to invest and put money and time into the boat. And in return for that, we need exclusivity on sale. Yeah,
it's a business, isn't it? It's just a business decision. You can't. The videos that I produce are quite expensive to produce, and the time that Ed spends on everything and putting together technical specifications. I mean, even just the technical specifications of a yacht. Why would you spend a good day making sure they're all accurate if then everybody else, every other competing broker can just take them off of you, say thank you very much, I'll pretend that I've done this? You need some sort of guarantee of exclusivity. Good question, Harold. Thank you very much for that. Let me know if that did answer your question, please. Working my way down, we're getting more and more questions coming in. Pilot Nelson again says, are your sales based more on boats you have listed or finding boats for clients, so as in real estate? So do you work more with buyers or sellers?
Sellers, completely. I mean, if you're a buyer, unless you've got a form of mandate, you can pretty much go anywhere you want. And one of the big mistakes I first made was a lot of people would be like, Ed, I've got someone looking for this, or I'm looking for this, and you'd go around the market and then you find out that client has actually asked 10 different brokers. Yep. When you've got a seller and he appoints you, you control the sales process. So you're his point of contact. So with the Norwegian I mentioned earlier, he interviewed with 5 or 6 brokers, and eventually he came with us and we sold his boat within 6 weeks. And after that, I proved myself to him, and I proved that I was capable of selling his boat and quickly. And we've since built up a very, very good relationship. So I'm now searching for his new boat. But I think without having done a sale or sold the boat, it's very difficult for clients to really trust you. So it's not that I haven't represented buyers. One of the first transactions I was involved in was a Benetti, and that was for a buyer. And the first transaction of this year was for a buyer as well.
Yeah, with the CRM.
With the CRM, yeah.
Now, Dimitrios Siganis says, hello, is it more difficult to sell a new yacht or a used one?
A new yacht.
More difficult, yes, I would say so too.
I think it's there's a stigma for the difficulty in relationship between brokers and shipyards as it is. We've discussed new yachts with a number of clients, especially when they can't find what they're looking for, and you say, you know, let's go to the shipyard. But the biggest problem with selling a new boat is there's a huge premium over the brokerage option, and very often they can get what they want from the brokerage one. And yeah, I personally, selling brokerage is much easier. It's not to say I don't want to sell new. I've spent plenty of time at Cannes Show going around the usual suspects trying to sell a boat, but usually it's much easier. And also, you know, some clients really do appreciate the work that you put in. It's not just the email that they get with the boats available. It's not just the phone call, but the hours of research, and it's going to the shipyards and making the notes and making sure your notes are up to date and consistently keeping in touch with the shipyard. So it's very often like, you know, they say you pay your lawyer not just for the contract, but for the years of training and everything that they put in. And it's the same with us. We're not just producing you a quick list of boats. It's us having gone to inspect them, meet with the shipyard, seen their quality, you know, researched all the things about them. We're not just doing a simple, you know, here's a brochure and have a look.
Sure. Now, Jasper Alport, I like this question. During the 2 years that you were working on the yachts, did you learn much about the brokerage industry?
I had no exposure to brokerage particularly, mainly because the boat was for charter, not that the owner really wanted to charter it. So I met with the charter managers once or twice who sort of came on board the boat. Then we had one charter which was towards the end of my time on board, and that sort of opened me up to the dynamics of how the charter was working. But it was only when the sale came about and the boat was selling, when I met the broker, that I really thought this is something I'm interested in. Now obviously I'd always known about the big brokerage houses, you always see Boat International, but actually when you're on board, you're relatively sheltered. So one of the first things I note is get to know your crew well.
Yeah.
So they're also, when you're crew and you know a sale's happening or a boat's for sale, you're naturally worried. It's your job, and you think at any moment now something could happen. So that, you know, remembering what it was like when we were going through the sale and we didn't have a clue what was happening, made a big difference to how I am with the crew today.
Correct.
And also, we're not guests on board. That's the other thing. And I think that should be made clear.
Harold has sent us another super chat. Thank you very much, Harold. Very much appreciated. And he asks the question, are you handling the sale of AWOL? For those of you who don't know, AWOL is the San Lorenzo captained by Super Yacht Captain, which is a fantastic YouTube channel worth looking at. Are you selling AWOL?
No, I'm not selling AWOL. It's not to say I'm not the exclusive listing broker of that. That is our good friend Kevin. Kevin works, you know, sort of, Dave and I often talk about sort of competing brokers and sort of politics between us, and Kevin's one of the brokers I do have a lot of time for. So he is representing the seller of AWOL. But I have put her in selections and I have sent her to clients, and I have a very similar boat for sale of the same age, which is a similar shipyard, more competitively priced. So that's for another day.
Christian Bell asks to give him a wave. There you go, Christian. Done that. Going back through some of the other questions. Harold. Do you list the boat yourself, or do you have dedicated listers working on objects?
No, we sign listings ourselves as brokers, so it's our job to go out as brokers, find clients, or get referred clients, and then the listing is assigned to David or myself, or David and myself, under the Northrop and Johnson name. It's then our responsibility to keep the relationship with the boat, with the client, and you know, we don't sub it off to anybody else. When you inquire about Tanusha or Dynasty or one of my listings, that inquiry comes to me, and it's then my job to come back to you with the information. It's my job to organise your inspection on board, and I oversee the whole sale. So that's your job.
Pilot Nelson has another interesting question. He says, I'm in the RV biz. I'm not sure what the RV business is.
RV business? As in the caravan business, maybe?
Caravan?
Yeah. Is that what
or recreational
vehicle?
Vehicle, yes. I'm in the RV biz. Sales are through the roof. Where are the number of sales the greatest? The million to 3 million? 3 million to 5.5? No, 3 million to 5? 5 to 10? Over 20 million? Etc. So where do you see the most prolific sales coming from?
Well, we always, the biggest stuff, so 20 million plus, usually you would get 2 or 3 a month maximum, I'd say. I'd say most of the sales at the moment are probably 3 to 5 million.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's sort of where the majority of buyers are, whether it's new or whether it's brokerage.
A question on charter here from Felix T. If you charter a yacht in the normal price category, you need to pay for fuel in the marina for your place and so on. Oh yeah, so you pay for the fuel, the berth. What about super yacht charters? Do they have to pay for their fuel?
Yeah, if you charter a yacht, the cost you see online, so if you charter Da Vinci for 250,000 euros a week, that purely is the bareboat cost of the boat. You get included in that, you get obviously the boat, the furniture, the crew.
The crew, yeah.
But any food, any fuel, any marinas, any taxes, anything on top, consumables is on top of that. That's,
irrespective of the size of the yacht.
Correct.
So if it's a super yacht or a small yacht, that's always the case. This looks like an interesting one. Pilot Nelson again. What part of a yacht do buyers spend the most time looking at or asking questions about? The galley, the bedrooms, the saloons, the sun decks?
Different buyers, some are fascinated with the engine room. They like to put their head in the bilge, even if they don't know what they're looking at. Just a clean bilge means a lot. Some people say the galley is, is usually sort of more experienced owners know how to, what's required in their galley, and so they'll know that the size of the yacht, whether it's appropriate or not for serving spaces. The master cabin is always very, very important. A lot of people like to know it's quiet and it's insulated, and then obviously the main saloon. I mean, deck spaces actually, it's only once that I've been around a boat and someone's commented there's not enough sunlight on the actual deck space, it's too shaded. But generally it's usually sort of, they'll look at the specifications before they come on board. We'll do a selection, they'll have a good idea of the taste and everything.
Yeah. I get a lot of comments about the decor generally. People will say, it looks a lot darker than it looked in the photos, or it looks a lot nicer than it looks in the photos. Decor's a big thing too. I like this question from Chris Bretney. Do you think the yacht industry will move toward the diesel electric systems like the wider yachts? And then he says, love your videos, David. Nice to know, thank you, Chris. Diesel electric?
I think all hybrid technology is, that is the way forward. I think, Dave and I represent a lot of fast yachts which are burning quite significant fuel, and the sellers don't seem to miss it that much when they get rid of it. So I think any form of hybrid propulsion or minimal fuel burn is sort of where people are going. And a lot of people also are very focused on, speed seems to be less of an issue now. Even with the fast boats, when we see them, it's very rare that you see them going full speed. So I definitely think it's the way forward. David's a huge fan of wider. I think the technology is definitely there. It's not my favourite boat out there, but definitely I think, that's the future.
Good. David Reinitzer says greetings from Vienna, Austria. He's a big fan. Thank you, David. Thanks for watching. This is a good question. Again, super yachts, tenders and toys. How are the boats distributed to the different brokers of a central agency?
So in terms of...
Well, I guess if they're thinking that maybe an inquiry comes to the head office, how do they distribute them to the brokers? Or is that the way that it works?
I mean, within Northrop we have the inquiries and boats. So if somebody calls up the Monaco office and says, I want to sell my boat, there's a rota within the Monaco brokers. In the same way there's a rota for the Antique brokers, and depending on which day the inquiry comes in by phone call, it's distributed to the different brokers. So you could have an amazing week and pick up 5 leads, and you can then be on the following week and get no leads at all. I mean, not that I've ever had 5 leads in a week, but that's generally how it works. And the same with website inquiry. So every website inquiry that comes in throughout the 40 brokers at North Rock is on a round robin. So it could be for, a 20-foot, sort of rib, or it could be for a 60-foot or 60-meter fetching. You don't know which lead you're going to get.
Yeah,
it's completely
random,
randomly sort of distributed. The difference is if I have the central agency on a yacht, and David has a central agency on a yacht, such as Veni Vidi Vici, if a lead comes into the house, that's assigned to David and I specifically for that yacht.
Yeah. But apart from that, it's really up to us to go out there and get the listings. Not many get sort of served to us on a plate. It's up to us to go and do the work. Harold has sent another super chat. Thank you, Harold. We're going out for a beer actually after this, so beers are on Harold this evening. Thank you very much. And he asks, are you also handling the takeover of existing crew?
Yeah, I mean, crew, we don't personally, Northrop do crew services. When a boat's selling, the first question we always ask a buyer is, do you want to keep the crew? Because more often than not, if the crew, we're working on a transaction at the moment, and at the end of the survey report, the goods and the bads, the closing remark from the surveyor was the crew were exceptional throughout the whole thing. So the buyer wants to keep the crew on board.
Right. And
I think that's where we're involved. But apart from that, I don't place crew. Sometimes we'll hear, one of my fleet will say, or the captain's leaving for another position, the owner will say, do you know someone? And I've always, as I said earlier, I've always got captains I know well who I'll put forward, but it's not my job. I don't like to do other people, that's a crew agent's job. In the same way, I wouldn't expect a crew agent to try and broker a boat. So people have their jobs, and that's how I see it.
Actually, just as well for your information, when a yacht's sold, one of the documents that has to be submitted is a letter from each one of the crew saying that they've been paid up to date and they're not owed anything. Because the debts, if there were a debt, would go with the boat, and the new owner would then assume that debt. So there's a very clean cut. Once a yacht's sold, the crew are no longer employed, and then it's up to them if they want to go with a new owner, sign new contracts, or if they want to go somewhere else. Christian Bell, what's the hardest part of being a broker?
Disappointment. I think the hardest part was, to begin with, I came in, I was very wide-eyed in the industry. You do the Monaco Yacht Show and you see the amazing boats, and you see brokers doing phenomenally well, and you think, this is what I'm going to do. And then, so when it took a long time to get going, and the hardest part was when you get finally a buyer and a seller agree a price, and it's then, the deal is so far from done. You've got to get a contract in, you've got to get a deposit in. I mean, this year, David and I, we've had some disappointments with people not sending deposits, or sort of not actually being as qualified as they made out to be to purchase the yacht. And you can even get all the way through an excellent survey, and it's all down to just controlling a buyer and a seller. And when the buyer decides he's had enough, or he doesn't want the boat, or after a sea trial, we had a sea trial last year where the client was too cold on board, and for that pure reason he walked away from the deal. And you think, for all the work and effort, and it comes to nothing. And the other big disappointment is when you put your heart and soul into a boat. David and I listed one, and you really do everything you can for that boat, and then they fire you, and for no good reason whatsoever, and the boat is still for sale 2 years later. That still puts a smile on my face. But,
I know exactly the boat that you mean, and I remember well getting the telephone call
in an autostrada.
And being told that the contract was up, they were going to give the boat to another broker, and as you rightly say, it's been on the market ever since. So, moving on, Martigan UK says, good to finally meet the infamous Ed Dickinson, because you feature, or your name features in a lot of videos. Pilot Nelson tried to donate some cash. Thank you very much, Pilot Nelson, but the system locked up. I don't actually know how it works. I've got to be totally honest with you. I think you have to set it up to work. I'm not really sure. Again, super yachts, tenders and toys. What's the average broker's attitude towards social media as a marketing medium? There doesn't seem to be many active brokers using it. Present company excluded, of course.
I think it's the way forward. So, I mean, I know for a fact that the company recently has been doing a lot of Facebook ad campaigns, which have led to both charter and sales inquiries. I think it comes down to the individual broker's preference. I mean, I rarely use Facebook. I'd use Instagram more. I know that there's some brokerages who are very strict on not allowing any content of their boats on there for privacy reasons. So obviously you always have to check what you can post and make sure that your clients aren't upset by it. Some clients are very proud of their boats being on social media. You'll see that their yachts have got their own Instagram pages. So that's absolutely fine. And I also know that there's some other brokers at the houses who have full-time social media help. They hire people just to run social media accounts under their name to keep the interest going in the yachts. And I know that, especially for neoprene, we definitely got a few inquiries through Instagram. But I think Instagram is probably more than Facebook. But I'm not the best at it.
Yeah, and a lot of brokers, I think, kind of abdicate the responsibility to somebody else. They get their secretary to do it. And then there are a few exceptions to that. I think, for example, Jim Evans from Super Yachts Monaco, he's very active on Instagram, and it's clearly him writing on that account. Good question, thanks for that. This is a good question from James. If you could go back to the beginning of your career, what is the top tip you'd give to yourself? That one there.
Well, I definitely do it again. And I think it's just managing expectations. It's taken me. It took me until year 3 before I could say that I was at least had my head above water. It's not comfortable, but my head above water financially, and you can't do it differently. And I think the only thing I'd say differently, because I suppose there's a few people I know now who I suppose I wouldn't have wasted as much time on, but there's no listing that I've taken which I've ever said that was a complete waste of time. Every listing you learn something new, and you meet a new captain, you meet a new crew, you'll always get an inquiry out of it somewhere. But it's just managing expectations. I think it's the one thing
And AFP557 says, other than disagreements on price, what's normally the most common reason for a negotiation or a deal to fall through?
Condition of the vessel. Usually, every. I think the biggest problem is for an owner, it's their pride and joy. Everybody loves their boat, and they believe that it's perfect. I'm the same with my car. Everyone believes it's perfect, and even the small deficiencies that you see every day, because you see them every day, they sort of go over your head. And buyers are the other way around. Buyers are coming into buying a boat, and some of them come on board and they fall in love, but a lot of them don't. They bring their surveyors on, and the surveyor's job is to play devil's advocate, and a surveyor's report is like going to the dentist. They're never going to say good things. They're never going to say the boat's exceptional or everything. They're just going to say the boat is fair, and it comes out very negative. And I find I really respect the job the surveyors do, because there's been boats which have been a tin of worms. I'm glad I've not put a client on them. But it is the hardest part, is the 7 days between the survey finishing and acceptance. And even when you get to that point, that's usually where the deal will collapse.
Martigan UK says, do you find certain makes tend to age better? For example, running costs tend to escalate over time. Can you say whose tend to cost more to run? That's a difficult question to answer, isn't it?
I can probably say that if you're Northern European, if you say, for example, you've got something like a Fedship F45, I think the brokerage price of them now can't be too far off what the original build price was.
I agree.
And I also know that the yacht I worked on, the owner's build price, and he owned it for 10 years, and he sold it for near enough what he paid for it. Now, you've got to take into account that there was significant running costs and refits in between that, so it was by no means out of the blue. But I mean, there's obviously, I think the market which is hit hardest will be the fast boat market. I mean, I see some of the boats that I've sold recently, and you look at the new build cost of them and what people paid even in 2009, 2010, and they're getting back a quarter of what they paid.
Yeah.
That's the difficult thing.
But
to
you
stop.
look at Mangusta, for example, who build fast yachts, but now they're starting with a product range as well of displacement yachts, more traditional sort of yachts, and they're still selling well actually with those go fast Mangustas. But I'm sure that in their mind they're thinking, what will we do if the market slows down? At least we've got a different product range as well. Now, on that same subject, there's two questions I'm going to combine into one because it's on the same theme. Martigan UK and also CB Fraser. What ages do the running costs tend to escalate, and when does a yacht tend to slow down on depreciation?
I find that obviously the first year we always say for production or sober production we say 25% in the first year. It's like an exponential curve. So there's a number of boats which if we say a Bonetti 115 from like 2000 to 2004 or something like that, that period there, they're all going to be worth around the same, no matter what the age. And you look at the engine hours and you'd say the paint, or you get to that sort of age where if it's a semi-production or a production boat, it's usually down to the age and the engine hours and the condition and sort of the paint. That's what would differentiate, not the actual whether it's a 2003 or a 2000 boat. But then there's stuff like the classic Fed ships. There's still like Minderella sold 2-3 weeks ago for asking $15 million, and these boats are holding their value at a much higher level.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a very steep curve, and then but there's some stages where you look at a boat and you just say it really couldn't lose much more. If you broke up the boat and sold the engines and sold sort of the carpets and the furniture, it'd still probably be worth more than the brokerage price. So they definitely reached that point.
Yeah. Here's another good question from Svetlin Karazov. Is there a part of the MEBA MOA that you often have to amend or edit?
The two big things that I find we change most are personal warranties.
Yeah.
Because sellers do not want to give a personal warranty on the sale of their boats, even if you explain why there is a personal warranty and that it's not coming back to them because someone snapped a toe on board or something. A lot of sellers do not want to give a personal warranty, so that has to be taken out. And the other one is the order of, usually it's the order of survey and sea trial. I find people want to be able to do they want to haul the boat out first to clean the bottom, to then sea trial the boat because you get best performance. But the way the contract's written is you sea trial first, then there's a 24 hours to accept reject before you haul out. But it doesn't actually logically make sense to do it that way, especially on a fast boat, because you won't get best performance.
I think the personal guarantee annoys people as well, because in the sales process there's already many documents they have to sign to say that the yacht is free of any debts and liens and there's no money owing on it, and they've signed it maybe 3 or 4 times, and then they also asked for a personal guarantee, and it just annoys people, doesn't it? They don't want to sign it, maybe for that reason.
And especially when they're owned by a company.
Yes.
The boat's owned by a company, it's not owned by them personally.
No, that's right. Super Yachts, Tenders and Toys again. What is your opinion on courses offered in yacht brokerage? For example, the one offered by the Maritime Training Academy. Would this be helpful for aspiring brokers?
I actually did that course.
I did
half of the course.
Yeah.
And I found that course in particular there was a lot of things in it which I'd already sort of picked up along the way, and it was also more geared towards sort of smaller boats. Sort of 50 footers, 40 footers. So for that personally, I didn't think as much. Now, I do think it's, as an unregulated industry, the lack of education is shocking.
Yeah.
There's a lot of brokers who I think need a bit of education in what to do, how to, I do think that the boards such as Libra and MEBA should enforce a compulsory exam, and it should be accredited, because even brokers who don't even know, I had somebody claim to be a broker showing around one of my listings about 2 weeks ago, and he actually asked me to itemize what the buyer had to do next in terms of how should you put the offer in, and what's the deposit and what contract are you using. And I just thought, and this is somebody who's claiming to be a broker to his client. So I in the same way that Northrop didn't want to just let me loose, they sort of put me under David to train David on the way things are done. You do have to do it, and I think again, going back to one of the earlier questions, I think that would be very beneficial.
Yeah.
Teach us how a MEPA contract works, what obstacles we'll run into.
And you and I often have a laugh at the sort of self-proclaimed gurus that spark up here, there and everywhere, sort of teaching people how to sell yachts who maybe never even sold a yacht themselves, to mention no names. CB Frazier says, hello from Orlando, Florida. Well, hi right back to you. Hope that the weather's good there. We have another super chat from Harold again. Thanks, Harold. Do you only sell motor yachts? What about sail?
I'm working on listing a sailing boat at the moment, but we find with sailing yachts that often the buyers know more than the brokers.
Yeah.
You've got to be extremely specialised, and also sailing yachts only account for about 10% of the market.
Yeah.
So it's a very, very niche market. You've got to know that boat inside out, and with sailing, you've got the added thing is knowing the sail plan, knowing the rigging, and the condition of all of that. So usually, if I got approached by someone to sell their sailing yacht, I'd probably work with someone like Yost and Palmer, who's done sailing all of his life and knows, has the sea running through his veins.
Yeah, it is one of the good things of working with a large brokerage that we've got colleagues like Yost. How do you pronounce Yost's surname? Govets, who's an amazing knowledge of sailing yachts. James Munn, as well, great knowledge of sailing yachts. So it's good to be able to collaborate with people who are more knowledgeable than we are. James says, do you believe in the future of the yachting industry for the world's biggest market of luxury goods, the Chinese markets?
Every interview you read, they always say China's the next big market. They always say Asia's the emerging market. And you always hear it. But of my inquiries over 5 years, I think I've sold one boat to a gentleman from Southeast Asia, and I've had probably 2 other inquiries from China. There's a market there, but it's still not in their culture in the same way it is in Western culture. So I don't believe for a long time it will be a big market, and also they don't have the infrastructure to support it.
No.
If a lot of when we sold this 50 meter earlier this year, it was to a client from Southeast Asia, and he actually said he couldn't go any bigger purely there was no infrastructure to support the boats. So.
Sure. It's kind of interesting because the Chinese have bought numerous shipyards. Sunseeker, Ferretti Group is largely owned by a large Chinese company, and there's others as well that just don't come to mind. But so they're buying yacht builders, but they're not buying that many yachts. Nick Moss wants to know what your favourite yacht is. Have you got a favourite?
I've got 2 favourites. One is a boat called Seesaw, which I'm sure he'll know, and the other one is probably Sea Owl, the Fed ship.
Sea Owl, really?
Which Northrop have listed for sale, and so long before Northrop listed it, it's a really remarkable boat, a very, very intricate interior, and I think it's got everything you'd ever want on a yacht.
Felix T, is it easier to sell a sailing yacht or a motor yacht, and when does it become difficult to find clients for the boats? The higher the value, the more difficult it becomes? Question mark.
I think motor yachts are definitely more easy to sell purely because it's a much bigger market, and there's also the higher the value of the boat, the less buyers there are. So one of our American brokers very early on said to me, forget about selling 100 million euro yachts, forget about that 100 meter market. He said, there's so few buyers in that market, you'll waste your time trying to chase it.
Yeah.
He said, focus on the 40 meter market, on the 5 to 10 million euro transactions. He said, if you can put 3 of those, 4 of those away a year, you'll have a very good life, and you'll be far happier than chasing one 70 meter which doesn't come through.
Pilot Nelson, how often do you suggest touch-ups and repairs to owners before putting the yacht on the market? And specifically, what's the most important thing to fix?
I always say that, sort of present the boat as you'd expect it to be presented. When your first impression when you walk on a boat is very important. So if the boat's dirty or if it's overdue a certain piece of work, it really stands out. Now, it's a tough one because if a boat's due a paint job and it's really poor paint, that's the first thing someone's going to see. And depending on the size of the boat, it could be anywhere from 200,000 to €1 million to paint the boat. And so they're not going to want to do it, and they're also not going to see the money back out on the other side. You never really see money from a refit in the resale, but I'd always say just making sure that classification's up to date. Boats which are dropped out of classification are the hardest for us to sell.
Yeah.
Because it's just a big red flag, and a lot of insurers will not insure boats now out of classification.
Lynn Ronald asks, is there an average length of ownership? There must be an average length of ownership, but do owners tend to change vessels every 3, 5, 10 years?
We find it's usually about 3 to 5 years, the ownership cycle. Some people, though, they're very set on it for life, and other serial guys are 16, 17 boats in.
Martin UK wants to know what would be your cars of choice. We shall, we'll indulge that question, even though it's got nothing to do with yachts. What's your car of choice?
I've only got one, but...
No, if you could have any, what's your perfect brokerage car?
Perfect brokerage car would be a Bentley Continental.
Are you kidding me? Really?
Yeah,
You'd roll up with a Bentley?
Yeah, I think so, because
You don't think you'd upset the owners?
No, I think it'd be a perfect long journey car. I'm sure yours would be an S-Class Mercedes.
No, actually, I'm kind of into the Porsche Macan at the moment. I just think, also because in France, car parks are so tight that you don't want anything too big because it's just difficult to park. Anyway, getting to a more serious question, and this is a good one. Atoning Univex, what a cool name. I presume that's the name of your channel and not your name. Can you cover this tax paid or not paid bit? Is it just a tax fiddle? Or what problems can it cause? Good question. So the whole VAT paid, not VAT paid, can you explain to the viewers what that's all about?
It's so if you are an EU resident and you own a boat and you want to use it in EU waters privately, it has to be tax paid. There used to be ways of getting around it. You used to be able to charter the boat to yourself, but now they're very strict. If you want to use your boat in EU waters, it has to be VAT paid. If you're a non-EU resident, so you're a US owner, and you keep your boat in the Mediterranean, you don't have to pay the tax on it. So some people say it's hugely beneficial to have a tax-paid boat because you're selling your boat for 10 million euros, or you're buying your boat for 10 million euros. If it's not tax-paid for an American buyer, it's great. If it is tax-paid, he's considering that the value of the boat is only 8 million, and he's effectively paying the tax difference. So it's always a difficult one. There used to be lease schemes where you could reduce the VAT payment from 20% down to 6%, but these have all pretty much been shut down. There's VAT deferral schemes, there's lots of things you can do, but these only, with the accounting costs associated with going into a VAT deferral scheme, it only makes sense of yachts over the value of 10 million euros at the moment. So VAT paid is very good for EU owners. In the same way in the US, you have US duty paid.
Cool. Harold sent us another super chat. Thank you again, Harold. And in fact, he says, since the beers are on me tonight, cheers. Do you choose listings on price or size?
We don't choose listings. I mean, if I was in the position where I could actually pick and choose my listings, I mean, Dave and I have obviously said no a few times, but we really do either the relationship is pretty awful, or the boat's condition is awful, or the seller's expectations are too high. But in general, the brokers can't be overly picky with what they represent. Yeah. But we both said, as long as we can see the charm and the value, and we can find the boat attractive ourselves, we'll take it.
Yeah.
If there's no redeeming features, however, we'll usually let it slide.
Yes, although when you're first starting up as a broker, as we both know, you do tend to take whatever you can get, really, don't you? And you learn your lesson from that. I'm going to shoot through a few questions here because we've been going for an hour and the beers are calling us. Frank V, really good question this. David, you always mention getting a good yacht management company. how does one go about discovering which company is good for anyone?
Like anything, well, with management, is it all just
Yeah, how do you find a good yacht management company?
good? We usually know a good probably 5 or 6 independent yacht managers, and we know what their personalities are. We know what their strong points are. We know what their weaknesses are, and it's a case of always putting a selection forward to the client. The client can then make a decision who suits him best. But we have our selected favourites who we like to work with, who we can trust, and trust is the biggest thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because if you refer anything, if it's a captain or a lawyer or management, and they do a poor job, it comes back to reflect on us.
Yeah.
So.
Great. AFP 557, how often would brokers physically visit a boat during the listing and sales process? Greetings from New Zealand.
We usually push to get the boats as close to the centre of yachting Monaco as possible, which is also why I live here.
Yeah.
So that when there's a viewing, I'm personally there to show the boat. The person who knows the boat best is the captain and myself. So, and it's also part of getting to know the crew, getting to know the owners. Now, there's some of my boats which, you list them for sale and it may go 6 months without seeing them, but because of their cruising plans or because of their location. But we try and get to our boats at least once a month to say hi, if nothing else.
Svetlin Karadzov, I'm so sorry for pronouncing that so badly. To me, the essence of yacht brokerage is connecting the pieces. Legal advisory, survey, crew management, charter. How often do you work with your clients from end to end?
Well, it's rare for us to step into a deal halfway through.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes they have a lawyer they prefer to use, or they'll have something in-house, family office or something which will manage it. But usually, from a sale, from the day we sign the central agency, we'll go and visit the boat, we'll inspect it, we'll give it an evaluation, and we'll put it to market, and then we follow it all the way through to the end.
Yeah.
And even afterwards, you can sell the boat, and the client can say, "I'm never buying another boat," but you'll keep the relationship going afterwards.
Great. Martigan UK says the car question was to get to know you guys. Well, you know us now. Bentley, was it you said a Bentley?
Yeah, I have a Bentley behind as well.
Sal V says it's the guy off Channel 5. Yeah, I was on the telly last week. So Channel 5 UK did a really interesting documentary about yachting, and I featured in that. So if you have access to UK TV, you can see it on my5.com. Attorney Unifex follow-up. If you buy a non-VAT paid, do you then have to pay VAT on it?
Well, your two options are you put it as a commercial vessel. So if you put the boat for charter on the charter market, you don't have to pay the VAT because it's an active commercial vessel, which is what a number of people do. But you have to actively seek business on it. You have to have it, good charter revenue. You can't just say it's for charter and use it privately. The customs are very smart on that. But apart from that, your only other option is to pay the VAT.
Right, I'm going to make this the last question. Because it's such a good question. AFP 557, when sellers contact you initially, do they usually have an accurate idea of what their boat is worth?
I think the biggest problem is they'll look online, they'll look on Yacht World, and they'll see, especially with boats like Mangus's, they'll see all these boats for sale at ridiculous asking prices, and that's usually the value. And they'll work between that value and what they paid for it. And our job is then to say to them, what is the value? David and I always say your boat is worth what someone's willing to pay for it. So we will set what we believe is an accurate market asking price to attract the right attention. If David wanted to buy a McCann and he saw one for sale, all of them were selling for 70, 80,000 euros, and then someone was asking 120, you're not going to go to the one asking for 120,000. You go for the ones which are realistically priced.
Yeah.
But sometimes sellers don't quite like to hear that the market is at 100. They may have spent 180 on it, and the market's now at 60, and that's the hard thing.
Well, we had, without mentioning the yacht, we were pitching on a very, very large yacht which had just been built last year, and the asking price, in our opinion, was off of the scale in what they thought it was really worth. And sure enough, we didn't get the listing. It was given to one of our competitors. It's still for sale. It will always be for sale until they get more realistic idea of the value. I mean, which is probably close to half of what they're asking, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a really good question, and a real issue very often, that sellers think that their yacht's worth so much more than it really is. I'm going to end it on that. Thank you so much, Ed. You've been a superstar. I hope everybody enjoyed it. If you'd like to hear more of these, I'm thinking in the future I'd quite like to have the next live stream with an older broker, so that you get all ends of the scale. Ed's sort of relatively new in the industry, extremely successful. I'd like to get somebody who's been in the industry for years and years and years as well. Let me just quickly read some of these, because they look, somebody says, how's your conch? Did I see that? Actually, my conch is fine, it's just scarred and a little bit bruised from the operation I had on it, but thanks for asking. Thank everybody for attending. Thoroughly enjoyed it, and have a good weekend.